Okay, welcome back to the channel. I'm joined here in person for the first time with my father. This is his office, so a lot of good memories of discussing things together ourselves. This is also the place where I first read the Gospel of Philip, so it's very special. So for those of you who haven't seen the first episode, this is again going to be about the Gospel of Philip. We're going to be continuing our exploration into the text, and I think going into more tangents and maybe less focus on the text itself, or at least we're going to be speaking.
That's difficult for me, not focusing on the text itself.
We'll see where it goes at the end of the podcast. We'll see where we end up.
Okay.
But that's the idea.
Yeah.
So why don't you start us off and
Okay,
yeah.
so let's recap a little bit. We saw that the Gospel of Philip is this weird collection of very short statements, but that you actually find structures in sections, and some 12 sections. The first section was a teaser, and the second section was really about reality, that the truth, or truth as a capital T truth, comes from a different reality, and that you cannot really say anything about it with the words that you have from here, but you have nothing else. So best do it anyway. So truth is one, but she became many in order to teach us through the many about the one.
Yeah,
that's the whole idea.
You need the many.
You need we are in the many. We are in the world. We are in a manifold
It's
world.
also what we spoke about with language.
Yes, exactly same as with language. So this is fun stuff, because already in this very old text, the core of the philosophy of religion is touched on. We cannot say anything about God, and yet we write big books about it. We have sermons, etc.
Yeah.
So that was, say, the first two bits that we did. Now, the total of 12 we're not going to do here, but there is perhaps one bit that I could be doing here, which is the first, what we call mystagogical text. So after having done 7 evenings, they've come to the decision, yes, I do want to be baptized, I do want to transform, I do want to be different. They are now amongst themselves, and they are in the night preceding the ceremony, and they are being introduced into the ceremony. So I guess the 3 texts that we're going to discuss, we're not going to discuss, but that would be discussed in the group, would either be done on 3 consecutive days or nights, or perhaps even in one. And then the last 2 are really, when you come back into the community, you get something of a sermon and something of a farewell speech with the group itself. Now, the interesting thing about the farewell speech is that it sort of summarizes the whole experience.
Yeah.
So maybe it's fun if we read
If you want.
the last bit of the entire Gospel of Philip, because then you've got an idea. If one becomes a son of the bridal chamber, so the bridal chamber is the big thing, he will receive the light. If one does not receive it while he is in these places, he will also not receive it in the other place. He who will receive that light, the powers will not see him, nor be able to seize him. Nobody will be able to torture this sort of human, even while he still inhabits the cosmos. Or when he goes through the middle, remember that middle area, when he comes out of the cosmos. Already he has received truth in images. The cosmos has become the other aeon. This world has become heaven, in a way.
Yeah.
It's already there. For the aeon is the pleroma to him. The pleroma is the other word of the fullness of God. Everything that's divine, everything that is, has become to him. And it is this way. So it's a reality. It's a reality that you live in heaven on earth. It is visible to him alone. It's the experience of the mystic. It's not hidden in darkness and night, but it is hidden in a perfect day and a holy night, holy light. And that's the Gospel of Philip in a nutshell. So the whole idea is, how do you get to this place where you are living in 2 realities at the same time? And I guess that's a question for you.
How do you do that?
No. How did your experience change you that you took something of that experience into your daily life?
Okay, yeah, I see the question. Well, one important thing for me was that while having experienced that and while feeling that it's in another level, it's not just on that level, as is being spoken about here. I think that is definitely something that happens often with people who have these experiences. They glorify them so much that the only place where they can actually experience the divine is within those experiences. But exactly the trick is to not go that way, is to find it here.
Yes.
And to realize that it's here. That requires a lot of presence. They often say that a spiritual experience is worth nothing if it doesn't make you into a better person. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't change you into a more present husband or mother or friend, if it doesn't turn you into a better person, and it's worth nothing. So I think integrating that experience requires a lot of discipline. It requires you likely make a change in your life because you've seen something so beautiful. You try to make the world more like that experience. That's something.
So what kind of changes did you make in your life then?
For me, it was mostly introducing love back into my life, or really into my life. I was already disciplined. Yeah. And you probably recognize it when I say this, but I wasn't as loving as I am now.
So may I paraphrase you now for
of
a second? So you went into love, into an experience, and you brought love out of that experience into your life.
Yeah, I discovered it.
Is that a good paraphrase?
Yeah, it's a great paraphrase. I think I discovered it. It wasn't even mine to take; it was mine to experience and mine to discover in this world. Like, it's there.
Well, the Gospel of Philip, this is the language of the Gospel of Philip. You went inside to bring it outside. Yeah. But the fun thing is, you became it. Mm. Because it says something like, whatever you see in this world, you see in this world and you stay the same. Whatever you see in the other world cannot be anything else than that you become it. So if you see the Father, you become the Father. If you see the Christ, you become the Christ. Mm. If you see the Logos, you become the Logos. Yeah. If it's not like that, it hasn't happened.
At least you try to be.
No, it's not trying to be. It's what happened to you. So if you want what you described as, I saw these loving beings during my experience. I thought.
Yeah, that's what I said.
And there was a wordless knowledge that you were communicating. Yeah. And so there's logos there. Yeah. And there's love there, and there's truth there.
Yes.
Can I use those words?
You can use those words. The only thing I'm always hesitant with is maybe I experienced something much lower than what these people are actually speaking about. In my experience, it was like the most overwhelming thing. But so
let's just because we don't have anything else.
Yeah, we don't.
We don't have anything else than your experience to work with now. So we're stuck with it. Okay. So let's just use it to approximate whatever they have felt.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
So in their language, they would have said, "I saw love and I became love. I saw light, I became light." Yeah. And then the clue is how to bring that out when you go back into the world. How to be light and be love in this world.
Well, it wasn't very difficult, mostly. I think for my family it was a lot getting used to me telling them that I love them all the time. And at first they likely won't believe you even. But I just felt, after a while of course, and he's more easy with this than others. But I think it takes a while to build character. First, it's like a habit. It's like, oh, he's got this new thing going on. But after a couple of years now, I think it's clear that it really transformed the way I view the world. And
that's a good remark that you're making. He's got a new thing going on. Although Lucas says he's disciplined, and he is disciplined, that was in going to the gym. Yeah. And then it was in eating no fat at all. Then it was in eating fat. I'm changing the words. I don't know the exact order. Then it was in eating eggs. Then in no eggs. Then it was in eating meat. Then in no meat, etc. So you had this embrace with all your discipline of different things. But this one was one that stayed. You've stuck with this idea of love. Yeah. You have not let go anymore.
No, because it's the only thing I really trust. I mean, nutrition science often changes. Same with the way I exercise, that can change. but acting from love to me is the highest thing you can do. And that's something I know for a fact. Like if you're a nihilist, you don't believe this, but I believe that it actually makes life better. I think that a life well lived is one in love with the world, in love with people, and with love toward other people. But actually doing that, especially at the time, was extremely easy because I had felt such an overwhelming feeling of love that I felt that all the other things, like the stress, the worries, they were so insignificant compared to the love, to a degree that they seem to be the unstable thing. They seem to be the impermanent things, but love seemed to be the permanent thing. So it was so obvious to me that what that would result in my everyday life is a breaking down of walls that kept me from loving people fully and trusting them with my love. Because I found out that the more love you give, the more you get. Even if someone doesn't explicitly say that they love you, you immediately get rewarded. So it's really true, and it's the most rewarding thing I can do is just acting from love. So that was very easy, especially after the experience. But it's very important that you keep working on this integration, to be disciplined, in the sense that you keep working on being present. Meditation helped a lot with that for me, but also just, exercising, just making sure that I'm also a balanced person in every way. Because if I don't exercise, I turn into a bit of a demon. And if I don't do my reading, I turn into a bit of, like, I also know I'm a very human person, so I can't just act like I'm a sage or something, but it definitely helped me to see what things in my life I was doing right and what things in my life maybe I could use less of, like vanity, like lust, like anger, like those things did not serve me so much. So I think what it did is it helped me see that more clearly. I think that's also what Christ does for a lot of people, because he symbolizes basically the archetype of good, and you kind of know what that is.
You're hitting it now. The whole baptism experience for the Gospel of Philip is to embrace the archetype of Christ.
Yeah.
To become Christ.
Yeah.
In effect. To become someone who has been christened, been anointed.
Yeah, but you never really become it.
No, they would say you became it.
Yeah, that's why.
Well, let me give you an example. I did my confirmation when I was 16, which was quite early in a Protestant church. So after your confirmation, you can go and be part of the Lord's Supper or the Eucharist, or how you call it. Being baptized as a child, you do a confirmation where you embrace the faith, and then also enjoy the presence of the community in the Eucharist, or the Lord's Supper, as we call it. And then I chose, because they asked me, what text would you like to be to receive? I could actually ask for the text that I would like to receive, which was perhaps a bit lazy on the side of the minister, but I could choose the text I really wanted, and that's the text, God is love. So for me, when I was 16, that was the most important text that I knew. God is love. And then I thought, of course, that I knew something about love.
Yeah.
Which I didn't.
No.
When it was only when your oldest sister was born, that was in South Africa. We were in South Africa. It was a beautiful experience. It was a home birth with one of the two midwives of the whole of Johannesburg present in our home, and we received this beautiful child, and it took a long time, and it was, of course, delivering a child is very, very difficult, but still it was a beautiful experience to be present with my wife in that moment. And then in the Dutch tradition, we go out and send birth cards out to everyone we know. And I got to I had a printer who was just on the other side of the Koppie, which is the hillside in Johannesburg, on the other side of our neighborhood, and it was more of an industrial area. So I would walk across the Koppie, going up, going down, meet all kinds of people, and And I was like in this pink cloud and thought, wow, all of you have experienced this love of having someone in your arms, a baby that you love unconditionally.
Yeah.
That cannot do anything in return, or you're not even thinking of about in return. And I was just thinking, wow, this is how my mother and father have loved me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is how God loved me, or loves me,
Yeah.
present.
Yeah.
So I thought I have never experienced, not even being in love with my wife, came close to this unconditional love. So that was really for me the first moment that I thought, well, I've talked about love so much, but I've never felt it the way that I feel it now at that particular point in time.
Yeah. And that's also a sort of experience that you then try to integrate, because I can imagine it informs your worldview as well.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people. I know for famously Joe Rogan, when he got his first child, I think, he started to look at the world and he's like, oh, these were all babies at some point.
Exactly.
It's like,
It's that feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes when you talk to people who say they are not religious,
Yeah.
but who have become parents, you touch on that experience and you share something of the thing that is bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful way of entering it.
Yeah.
Now, the text that we're going to go into a little bit is the text right before being baptized. And you have to get into a Greek philosophical tradition. We talked about Heraclitus at the time. They think of spirit as something that is like fire, like very hot air.
Mm-hmm.
And if the hot air falls down to earth, it is congealed. It becomes moist. It becomes water. And then we call it soul, because the verb for psyche also means the verb for cooling off.
Mm.
So they would say, with this text, from water and fire, the soul and the spirit came into being.
Yeah.
That's just physical fact. It's what a philosopher could have said in this area, in that Greek culture, without any problems. From water and fire, the soul and the spirit came into being. And if you read Origen, a Christian philosopher, a Christian Hellenist, could have said exactly the same thing. From water and fire, the soul and the spirit came into being. Now, the interesting thing is, from water and fire and light, so now something is added to it, the son of the bridal chamber comes into being.
Mm.
So light needs to be added. So now we're going to pick it apart, and the fire is the chrism. The chrism is the anointing, and the anointing is made with olive oil, and the olive oil is of course the same thing that you put into your oil lamp. So oil is potentially light, is potentially fire. So the fire is the chrism, the light is in the fire.
Yeah.
And the fire is in the oil.
Yeah, I know
so you see it is in the chrism. But I do not speak of that fire that has no form.
Mm-hmm.
And form is, of course, an important Platonic word, but of the other whose form is white, which lights beautifully and which gives beauty. It imparts beauty. So he's talking now about the highest form of light. So on the one hand, there is this oil lamp that spreads light,
Mm-hmm.
and on the other hand, there is this higher light that is represented by that image.
So the lamp is the image.
Exactly.
And the light is the form.
Now, the text that we're going through, rather than the 1-2-3, 1-2-3 rhythm that we had last times, is now slightly different. It is a sort of a spear point. So it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
So it ends at the end with the same thing. And now I go to the end immediately. Nobody will be able to see himself, neither in water nor in a mirror, without light.
Mm.
So now you get to it. Huh?
Yeah.
So seeing yourself, oh yeah, you can see yourself in the water, you can see yourself in the mirror. But if it's dark, you can't see yourself.
Mm. You need the light.
You need a light to see who you really are.
So you also need the form.
So then the form is imparted on you.
Yeah.
It is that which lights beautifully and which gives beauty.
Yeah.
It makes you beautiful. Neither again will you be able to see yourself in light without water or a mirror. So you can be in light like we are now, but I can only see you. I can't see myself. I need a mirror before I see myself. Or in this case, a screen from the video. For this reason, it is necessary to baptize twofold. In the heavenly, I add the word heavenly now, in light and water. In the heavenly light and the earthly water.
Does it have something to do with, if you think about the allegory of the cave, you go out of the cave, but you also go back inside with this information.
It changes your view of reality. But it's of course not just a cave. It's also a cave also feels like a substandard life.
Yeah, exactly. It's not. No.
And the light is the chrism. We already talked about it. So it starts with the same image as the last image. And I like to think of this image as people would go down. That's an interesting one. I don't know if you can see this, but on the image of the booklet, and you will put it on the
I'll just put it up
later on, is the oldest church that was ever found was on the Persian border at the Euphrates River, and it was collapsed in 231, so the 3rd century, and it had this beautiful little extra room where they would baptize people. So people would go in there, they would disrobe, everything would turn off, all jewelry would go off, there would be no difference between rich people and poor people, and they would be baptized in the nude, in the water, and would receive a white robe as they got out. Baptist churches now do it differently. You first get a white robe and then it gets wet. They would do it like first you would get into the nude, you would be baptized, you would come up and be anointed. So you would have this fire, this chrism with olive oil, and then you would receive your robe, you would receive a light in your hands, an oil lamp or what have you, and then the baptized candidates would enter the bigger room where the community would be, and then they would have their first Eucharist as a group, so they would be part of the community. Now, that little extra room is a dark room, because of course it was modest, so they didn't want people to be shamed because of their nudity. And this text that we just read says something very interesting. It says, look, here is the water, and you can recognize yourself into the water, but it's dark, so you can't see anything. So I imagine the people being brought into a room in which there is a water basin, but you can't see anything. So come closer.
I'm actually coming closer.
Yeah, I'm going to actually come closer. And can you see yourself? No, you can't see yourself. And then I bring in this little oil lamp with the burning olive oil. And now all of a sudden your face lights up. And you see yourself in the water. The miracle happens. The oil is brought, the fire is brought to the water, and the two together make you see yourself. Can you imagine?
Yeah, it's very special.
Now, if that happens in this explanation, then you know, wow, there's something that will happen to me. I will see who I truly am.
I think it's very important that it happens this way, because it mimics what is supposed to happen within as well.
Yes.
And I think that's the power, one of the powers of ritual, is that you do actually act out in reality, in physical reality, what is supposed to be happening within. So the transformation within should result in a transformation without, because otherwise you just have a spiritual bypassing where you can just be in meditation all day. But again, it doesn't result into you actually enacting that transformation on your daily life with the people you love.
All of this, community, physicality, words that give some guidance, should all be there. But the words that are spoken was interesting. John Vervaeke has a recent series on Transcendent Naturalism. Together with Greg Enriquez. Do I say that correctly?
I'm not sure.
Okay. And his last episode was on ritual. Main thing is ritual is not about the propositional knowledge that's being imparted.
No.
And the fact that we are talking about it is actually weird.
Yeah.
You should be part of it.
Yeah.
You should experience it. But I'm trying to at least get something of the experience across. But it's the community, it's the experience, it's the shivering, it's the shame, and then no longer shame by disrobing, etc. Everything that happens to you is part of it. And what you just said is exactly how the Gospel of Philip then proceeds. It says, remember that we talked about truth, that it had to come into language. Well, it also comes into ritual.
Yeah.
So truth did not come into the cosmos naked, but she came in types and images. And a typos is an image.
Yeah.
An image is an image.
Yeah.
It's just almost the same word. You will not receive her in any other manner. You receive her, you receive the truth. So the utter truth of the transformation of the other aeon is not received that I explained to you what's going on.
No.
But by being part, by participating in the ritual.
Yeah.
There is being born again,
Mm-hmm.
and there's an image of being born again.
Yeah.
It's truly necessary to be born again on the inside through the image, through the ritual on the outside.
Yeah.
What is the resurrection? What is the image? Through the image, it is necessary to rise up. The bridal chamber, and we'll get to the bridal chamber, why the bridal chamber is important, but I'll do that a little bit later. The bridal chamber and the image. Through the image, it is necessary to come into truth. And that is the restoration. That's an old Greek term. But it is something that everything is restored as it should be. So paradise is restored.
Yeah.
Paradise is regained.
Yeah.
It is necessary for those who do not only receive the name of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but that they themselves are acquired by you.
Yeah.
So this is also their criticism of the normal church. You would be baptized in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Oh, that's nice. No. They would say you have to become Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. If one does not acquire them, even that name, that's the name of Christian, shall be taken from you in the end. That's the scary thing. And this is also how they're still scaring these non-Gnostic, these people to become Gnostic Christians rather than remain in the church. So that's sad again. But I think the idea behind it is important, that something of who God is will be part of you. So as Paul would say it, God will be all in all, will be everything in everyone.
Yeah. I think the idea that you actually you have to become Christ, or you have to become, I think in many ways it can also be very dangerous, because I always think about these things in the sense that you can be close to God or you can be far from God. If you have a conceptualization that you're actually becoming God yourself, then there's no more work to be done.
No, that's absolutely true. And they may be overshooting here somewhat, but not too far. Remember that in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, you be perfect like your Father is perfect. He's asking something that you cannot be.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, it is this aspiring to
that
draws you upward.
Yeah, that's the idea.
And this aspiring to says that something in you becomes one with that to which you are aspiring. And the fun thing, of course, about the anointing is that you are actually anointed in this baptismal ceremony. So it says, and one receives them, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, in the chrism, which is the resin of the power of the cross. So resin is something that a tree that is cut would let go of. Huh? That's this
Sap.
this sap, but it's sticky and it's
Yeah.
smelly and it's very nice smelling actually.
Yeah, I like it.
And they put it into the oil to make, when you burn the oil, you get this nice fragrance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So, but what he says is this olive oil also has something of the suffering of the cross in it. And this power of the cross, the power that the apostles called the right and the left, we already talked about right and left on the cross. You are no longer a Christian, but you are a Christ. You have become anointed, because Christ just means the anointed one.
Yeah.
So the Lord did everything mysteriously. Baptism, chrism, Eucharist, and then of course redemption and bridal chamber. Now it's perhaps good to understand a little bit why they are talking about the bridal chamber all the time. Because it's the unity of feminine and masculine. You may remember that when God creates human beings, they are created in the image of God, male and female.
Yeah.
So God is not a man, God is not a woman. God is the integration of male and female. And I guess that's part of the beauty of it. And but they would trace it back. They would say, why does death exist? Because man and male and female got separated. So they would say, well, the whole act. Remember that we said that the God of Genesis is not a good God in the eyes of the Gnostics, because God took Eve out of Adam.
Yeah.
He separated male and female.
Yeah.
And what the apokatastasis, the restoration of all things, is to restore maleness and femaleness to a new integrated whole again. So that's the experience that they want. We can say a few more things about it, but it would be fun to listen a little bit to you. But because you are now in a committed relationship, how does that feel for you? What does it do for you?
Integrating the
Maleness and femaleness.
Well, it's funny, I spoke about this before in another conversation, that I actually quite have a feminine way of going about things in terms of personality. And, I have this loving side as well. And my partner, my girlfriend, she also has some masculine features. But what practically looks like for us, at least for me, what I aspire to is to integrate both sides of that. So I try to... Well, I think the ideal in the Christ, I think, is that as well, as the masculine and the feminine incorporated. And I think what happens, at least this is how Jung talked about it, is that as a man, when you encounter women, something of your feminine spirit gets activated, your anima. And in women, it can work the other way around. Like when women are with men, their animus gets activated. So there's some of that. And of course, men and women aren't masculine and feminine. Like I say, it's much more nuanced than that. But it can elicit that sometimes for you. And I think it did do that for me. To go back a bit in my life, I never really had female friends. But when my brother got a girlfriend, Madlief, I remember that distinctly activating my feminine side. I was like, oh, okay, I have this soft side as well. And that's, I think, what your mother can do for you. Yeah. And in my relationship, I think what I've really learned is to take some of those traits. Even though my girlfriend has some masculine traits as well, she really has activated that and it made it more like lasting, let's say, that feminine side. Yeah. And I'm much more comfortable with it, which I think some men can have trouble with embracing. They have trouble with being vulnerable for some of these reasons. So that's a bit. Yeah, I've experienced it, and I think you're the same. Like you're.
I'm the one who cries during movies.
Every movie, like the worst movie.
The worst
my
movie,
mom,
I will cry.
Yeah, my mom is quite. She can be also quite masculine in many ways.
As a matter of fact, she will look at it. Oh yeah, no, okay.
Yeah, but she's still the one I always went to when I had to cry. Like there is that deep, that motherly power. I feel.
Yeah.
That is deeply linked also to her being the mother. that she would be the one that I, like as a child, that I would go to if I.
Yeah, I think we have to distinguish very much between persons and archetypes.
Yeah.
And we're not saying that a woman needs to conform to a female archetype or a man needs to conform to a male archetype.
Yeah.
We're not saying that at all.
No.
We rather say that those archetypes are far bigger and larger. And we had a discussion about this with Aaron. Are far bigger and larger than what is now being typical male or typical female, because male and female together are generative. They're literally 1 + 1 is 3. I mean, remember Isis, Osiris, and then Horus gets born. So the whole thing about generativity, about life itself, about creativity, is that the male and the female together are able to produce life.
Yeah.
That is awesome. And the fact that you put two, in evolutionary terms, that you put two different sets of genes together makes the development of life so much quicker than if you wouldn't have that. So nature has really chosen to take these two archetypes as a way of developing us, making us grow.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that you mentioned Jung, because Jung basically lived in the 50s or something when he was writing about this, 40s. I don't know when he wrote this book. What was it?
Is it the archetype book?
Mysterium Conjunctionis.
Yeah. You have it over there.
Yeah. And what I like about the idea is in the 50s you had these very strong patterns of what a man was supposed to be in society.
Yeah, that was extreme.
And in Jung's thinking, it was, but he's not like that. The man is not confined to that role. He's far more than that, but he learns to sort of put parts of him in boxes in his subconscious, and then creates this image of who he truly is as a the feminine part of who that truly is. And that's what he calls his anima, which is a different word than the word soul in the Gospel of Philip. But it basically is, that is what is already you, and what is then ignited, or what you recognize as soon as you come into that relationship, that human relationship with your girlfriend. Yeah. And then something of you can be present there. So it's a lot more nuanced thinking, even though he comes from a very stereotypical period of time when males were supposed to be like this. And then he says the same goes for females, who are also restricted, but probably have a lot of male characteristics that they sort of store at the back. And then relationship is a way actually to become one again. And I think perhaps we have far more freedom nowadays. Yeah. So maybe it doesn't work anymore like Jung was describing it that much.
Not as strongly.
Not as liberating anymore.
Yeah.
I think it was a liberation to get into a relationship.
Yeah.
Because you were so confined in your stereotypical role as a man or as a woman.
Yeah.
And now it's the other way around. There's so much freedom that it's difficult to find out who you are.
Yeah, a lot of confusion for sure.
And now you decide, I'm a man or I'm a woman, and you decide to embrace a stereotype.
Yeah.
Sometimes. It's like a hyper-femininity that you sometimes see.
Yeah.
Or hyper-masculinity that you
and that's really what it resulted in as well, because we see the people that are gaining prominence are exactly these figures. Like, this is the age we live in. Mm-hmm. It's when we try to actually eliminate the feminine and the masculine, like they don't exist. The figures that come to the top, if you look at pop stars, for example, you have these hyper masculine like gangsters. Like Andrew Tate is the most masculine of these, I feel, and he's the one that young boys look up to, because it's just so confusing sometimes. And the same on the feminine side, you often have these
you're a bit special in that respect, that you do all these exercises, which gives you a masculine body.
Oh yeah.
And then at the same time, you're doing all these conversations that sort of embrace your femininity in that.
It's
as an archetype. So I mean, I'm not talking about biological maleness or femaleness.
Of course, I feel that's the goal.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I always experienced it. Well, not always, not as a teenager. Like, growing up in pop culture, that's not who I thought I should be. But more and more I see that's kind of an ideal I'd like to work toward. And on the outside, people might not see that, but as soon as they speak to me, they usually realize like, oh, okay, this is not a threat.
No.
Yeah. So yeah.
So you don't have to become colorless in your integration. You don't become an androgynous neuter. You become both male and female.
Yeah,
God
exactly.
created man, male and female, in the image of God, male and female. So God is very female, God is very male. We don't have to make all these kinds of stupid neutering that are heavenly parent or something. We can just say God our Father, and we can say God our Mother. It's all fine. There's this text that says God says, I delivered you, I bore you as a mother, or I took you on my hip.
I think it also shows in how many ancients just embraced the idea of goddesses. Even though like a lot of Greek society was quite misogynistic, even Aristotle himself, very clearly so, but they still had clearly this masculine and feminine, and the masculine didn't seem to, be any better in terms of gods and goddesses, but on the ground it was a lot different. So yeah, I'd say that.
Yeah. I would say, however, that the hyper-masculinity and the hyper-femininity is also part of the Greek pantheon. So that would be a different discussion that we need to have that one.
I don't know anything about Greek gods. I'm reading the Iliad and I'm just confused.
Well, there's a second point about male and femaleness that is important to the image for the Gnostics.
Yeah.
They would say the word psyche, our word psyche, sort of the psyche that Aristotle and Plato are talking about, is a female noun. It's a female. So psyche, soul, should be a she. So we both have a female psyche.
Yeah.
And they would have some stereotypical thinking about it. So the female psyche is always led. If the psyche is on its own, it will behave irrationally. It will not come to fruition.
Yeah.
But it can be led in different ways. It can be led by a bad man and a good man.
Yeah.
So their thinking was that if the psyche is led by the outer man, then it would be led into bodily functions like lust and jealousy, etc., whatever. But if it would be led by the inner man, by the heavenly man, by Christ, it would be led the good way. So they would say part of the problem is that the psyche got separated from the pneuma or pneuma, but it's you spell it with a P, the pneuma. The pneuma. So they would argue that without the pneuma, the psyche is mortal. Only integrated with the pneuma, or as Origen would say, remember this discussion about fire and water? And the psyche is the cold version, so she is human, she is terrestrial, but if she heats up by love, she becomes spirit, because she simply heats up. So water becomes steam. Goes up. So that would be the idea, the physical, philosophical way of looking at how psyche becomes spirit. But therefore it has to be let go of by the body, because as long as she is contained within the body, she remains moist.
So you need that love to become immortal.
Yes, that's the way that they would be thinking about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's also an acceptance of God. If you conceptualize God as love, and if you let that love in, then it can... Yeah, that makes sense to me. I always wonder about these things. Like, I had this experience, and then I felt no fear of death anymore, and I still don't if I think about it. But of course, I think if the moment comes, it's different. Especially being so young, and a fear of what it does to my environment, of course. But I wondered if people could lose that connection. You know what I mean? Like you say, you need that love to actually become immortal. Even though I didn't fear death for myself, I wasn't sure if that actually translated into no fear of death or no end of death for all people. and that's still something I wonder about a lot. And there's a lot of different thoughts about this in the religious traditions. I never I never reached a conclusion about that, because I can imagine that you get so stuck in the body by not realizing something transcendent, something of love that you can fail to reach.
Well, there was a little bit of that in our first discussion.
Yeah.
When you learned about that you could be dead without knowing that there is a life.
Yes.
So then you have no problem. You have no fear of death. Why should be afraid
that's
of
what
death?
atheists often say.
You're dead anyway.
Yeah.
And then you've got that you can be mortal, like you are alive, but you're in fear of losing that life.
Yeah.
And then you can be eternal. That means you have no fear at all, because you know it will go on. And funny enough, that's almost the same position as when you're dead.
Yeah.
Because you're no longer in fear. And I feel sometimes religion has made people fearful.
Oh, for sure.
So they've learned something about there is life. Oh yes, you've sort of sniffed it. You know that it's there, and you may not have it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the worst position. This Gospel of Philip would say that's the worst position to be in.
Yeah. Yeah, no, certainly. I'm afraid that's also been what turned so many people off to religion, why they like to embrace this idea of, oh, there's nothing, so there's nothing to fear.
Yeah.
In many ways, that's much more comfortable than thinking, oh, there's actually a judgment that can be quite terrifying.
Yeah, I always feel that also that the church tried to get a lot of power over people by saying, well, we can make you either get into heaven or in hell.
Yeah.
And if that's our power, then you best respect us for it and give us your money and etc. I don't think that most churchmen were like that, but the system as a whole probably functioned a lot that way. Yeah. So they would give money to build churches and monasteries, etc. And of course monasteries are very nice because knowledge is being passed on to the future generations, and beautiful churches are very nice, and I still enjoy going there, but sometimes it hurts. Like, hey, what was the motivation? Did we make people afraid in order to give?
Yeah, and it shows that there's a human element in all institutions.
Yeah.
So religion, I think that's why I had such a complicated relationship with it.
Yeah.
Still do. It's also hard to say what exactly is religion, what turns into cult-like behavior, or what turns into an oppressive institution. Which many argue it did and sometimes is, but then you wonder, okay, what's the alternative? And then when you have a state and there's no death, or there's no afterlife, then you can be even more manipulated by that. Because if you have fear of death, then you can you hold on for your dear life and you go to extreme lengths to keep it. So I think sometimes the alternative is even worse, and I think Peterson often says that what a lot of the atheists do is they try to discover the totalitarian spirit in a religious institution, but they don't realize it's not just the religious institution. It's not even coming from that. It's a human thing.
Yeah.
So it's in every institution, and it's probably worse in the state.
Well, that's the point. I mean, the manipulative is the human side, huh?
Yeah.
So if the church manipulates the access to heaven or hell in order to build its own position, the same could be said of the fact that there is no heaven and no hell, means that I manipulate how many days you still have to live. Like, for instance, health becomes the most important thing. Yeah. And I can take away freedom, I can take away truth in service of promoting health.
Yeah.
If that's the biggest thing that there is in life, the days that you still have to live,
then everything else will suffer.
Everything must be subservient to that.
Yeah.
So
it's very satanic thinking in the sense of like the number 6 and number 7. The number 6 being like you want to bend things to your will. 7 is the wholeness, the holistic view of reality. 6 is like so the Nazi Germany type of way of thinking about it. Like very analytical left brain thinking.
Yeah.
You completely...
Because you go into utilitarianism, you say, well, what's the biggest utility? That is that I live a healthy life for as long as possible. So what do I need to attain that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Is that really what makes people profoundly happy? to be healthy, yes, it's certainly important.
Yeah, but that's the problem
At
with
what
science,
price?
right? That's the problem with science, is it doesn't tell you these things.
Yeah.
So that's when people think that when science, they have a worldview that's like, it's subjective, it's good for the world, and it's like, no, it's not necessarily good because it can be used for evil as well.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't inform you at all about good and evil. So if science can tell you what good and evil is, you need something else. And if you think you can rely on your own intuition, I'd say you're pretty naive.
Yeah.
Like, I tried that for myself. Like, I was very much, when I came out of this experience, I was like, okay, it's not Christian God what I experienced, so let me just very carefully figure out what this thing is, like morality and stuff. And I started to like try to figure it out for myself. Maybe I could do that. And even thinking that I could is already such a...
Mm-hmm.
You're already taking such a stance of I'm above religion. And so I think we can't really do without. You need something to inform you, a worldview that is like without any knowledge on metaphysics, on things beyond just the scientific level.
Yeah.
If you try to do that for yourself, it's going to be very difficult. If you have a whole network of religious traditions that you can let them inform you, and I'm not just saying that Christianity is the only thing that can provide that, quite the contrary, but...
Yeah, the interesting thing with what you're saying is, of course, there are attempts to do that, to
Yeah.
have ritual without mythos, to
Yeah.
have the ritual without the story that accompanies it.
Yeah.
And often religion provides community,
Mm-hmm.
provides ritual, provides a story, a narrative. And as I just said, that episode with Vervaeke, these are all the pieces that are not propositional. We don't have to do this with scientific logic. Rather, we have to learn how we best be in this world.
So you're talking about the participatory,
Yes.
perspectival, and procedural.
Yes. Procedure is very much about the ritual. How do you do the ritual correctly?
Yeah.
Perspectival is within the story you take a perspective. Now I am the Christ.
Yeah.
And participatory means I'm being transformed in this experience. Because I'm actually baptized, I go down into the water. I'm actually christened. I receive the oil.
Yeah.
I actually become part of the community by moving from the one room to the other room, and I spread the light because I've got this oil lamp in my hands, and then I digest the body of Christ and the blood of Christ. By the way, they would also get milk and honey. So even the story of the Exodus would be brought back.
Yeah.
So there all these stories you participate in, both from a perspectival, procedural knowledge and participatory knowledge. It's mind-boggling.
And they haven't finished.
No.
I think that's a very important point.
Yeah.
You're part of this story.
Yes, you continue writing the story.
And it means a responsibility as well. So
Yes.
when people think like, oh, this is just like reviving some dead story that's...
Oh, it's one of the things that really scares me.
Yeah.
Is that people are discouraged now to baptize their children.
Mm.
They sort of say, well, we can cut that tradition here.
Mm.
We are at the point in society where we are enlightened enough to say, well, let's just stop it. It doesn't mean anything. Or if it means something, it is restricting the choices that my child would have. As if baptism would be saying, well, this is the only way for my child to behave for the rest of her life. And we sort of say, well, we stop the tradition here.
Mm.
We stop the ritual here. We stop the story here.
So this is a very modern idea, and why do you think it's wrong?
It's not wrong, but you have to start all over again. And what do you build in those few years that you have?
Mm.
Do you build community?
Yeah.
Do you build this multi-layered meaning system that you can be part of the Exodus at the same time that you're part of the crucifixion, and that you're part of the medieval experience that built the churches that you can still visit and see? Are you still part of the fabric of society, not just horizontally but also through time?
Yeah.
You have to start all over. Maybe you're that good.
What does it look like practically to start over?
Well, during that same episode, they talked about, okay, we'll do this new religion that's not Christianity, or do this participatory knowledge. Let's put in rituals, one with fire, one with ether, one with earth, one with water. Hey, funny, you're taking Greek philosophical concepts, so basically it's not that easy to escape predecessors.
No, you're going to take.
But even so, then you invite people to take part of that, say that ritual about fire, and so you make a big fire together and you say a number of things, and that's nice. But is it as rich as knowing that this is what your father did, this is what your grandfather did, this is what all those generations took place, this is who you have become? Maybe if your experience of who you have become is oppressive, that you want to get rid of it. Maybe if you feel that your peers find it ridiculous, that you want to get rid of. But you're basically giving stuff up. The question that I have is not that that's wrong, but how quickly are you able to build up something that replaces all that meaning?
Yeah, and if it would have been instantaneous, it would have been possible, then we wouldn't have a crisis.
I fear so.
Yeah. I know you want to...
I want to go back to the text. Yeah. I'm the text guy.
Let's keep it
so remember the spearhead that I was talking about, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We first had the two about the water and the fire, and then we had this image of coming closer to the baptismal font. And
so is this the top and the bottom?
That was the top and the bottom. Now we had truth came through images, and that is talking about ritual. And the fun thing, the thing that is across that in the Gospel of Philip, and I won't in this section I won't talk about it too much, is the crucifixion. So the mythos. So ritual and mythos are now juxtaposed.
Yeah.
So the story is as important as the ritual. The ritual reenacts the story, and the story informs the ritual.
Yeah.
And then we get to the more central parts, and that was really about what we were talking about, your love experience. Mm-hmm. So therefore he said, I came to make those from below like those from above, and those from the outside like those from the inside. So it's about reintegration. And to join them here, he works through types and images.
Yeah.
Now you had this talk about this sect that this cult about aliens. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, we just watched the documentary about a cult called Heaven's Gate.
You and your girlfriend.
Yeah. And this cult, the basic idea was that the two main leaders, man and woman, they were actually aliens, and they were convincing their followers that they were going to be picked up by the other aliens, and in order to be picked up, they had to, like, as much as possible, renounce the body, realize that this is not like this, but they did actually have to.
So that true self was an alien, and it was trapped in this human body.
Kind of, yeah.
So how does that work? So are you then in two places, or are you trapped here?
I think, I'm not an expert on this cult, but I think it was something like that. So initially they thought they actually had to, with their bodies, go into a spaceship.
Uh-huh.
This was like
the first story.
Yeah, this was like the 70s. Then at some point the female died from cancer, so that story didn't really hold up anymore. And then he was like, oh, she actually is already there. And then tragically in 1997 they all killed themselves, because then they would also all be there.
Okay, so we have here, in a nutshell, the early church. Originally, we thought
like this.
Originally, we thought that the Romans would have a big war on Israel.
Yeah.
And that God, with his angels, would snatch up the believers, bring them to heaven. That you can read that in Paul.
Yeah.
That's your spaceship.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the original idea.
Yeah.
But then some of the believers started to die. And Paul writes this beautiful letter in Corinthians, what will happen to those who have died? Because it's a weird thing. I mean, we're supposed to live until the spaceship arrives and we get snatched up. But now we've got guys and girls who have already died. So what do we do about them? It's a big problem.
So that's where your resurrection of the body comes from.
there was an idea that was already there,
Okay.
but now Paul needs to do two things, and he says, well, it's not like that we will precede them; they will precede us, because as soon as the spaceship arrives, he would call that the angel with the horns. They would blow the horns, and then the resurrection would be there. And then, of course, some say, yeah, but I understand that. So you've got these resurrection bodies. They're special. They can go up, but we are like bulky, fat. You not so much, but you're still heavy.
Yeah.
So how do you get up?
Yeah.
How does this soul that is being wet and watery and earthly become spirit that it go up? And then Paul needs to figure out something that he can use, and he knows that Jesus was seen after his death, and that he had a different type of body that could go through the walls and through the doors. So he says, we will have heavenly bodies. We have a body that can actually go through the stars. Same idea. So, and those who have already died, some people would come to say, well, that they had a problem with the resurrection as in the future. So more and more Christians came to believe, no, I'm not just dying, I will, as soon as I die, my soul will go to God, and I will be in heaven with my soul. So that's a little bit the story that your cult leader had when his friend died of cancer, that she was already there. And then it's the shedding of the body that becomes important.
Yeah.
So you rather die. That was not the original idea. The original idea was that Jesus would come before, at the height of the suffering, and everybody would be brought to safety. That was the spaceship.
Yeah, and I think it's mistaking the cosmos for
Spatial area.
yeah, or like reality in total, because that's modern ways of doing it for
Yes.
sure. And when we speak about the souls going through the stars, we're not actually speaking about stars. Like,
Yeah.
but it's still what people will read into it, and that's I think why this concept of extraterrestrials is so, people are so obsessed with aliens. Whether there's aliens on different planets, I won't argue against the four, but it's more like that's not the point. because we're so materialistic, the highest transcendence we can ever imagine is aliens on another planet.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous.
But that's
to me.
because we've now understood the planets like to be like Earths.
Yes.
But you remember the Lion King.
Yeah.
And the Lion King are the spirits of the ancestors of the lions have already died,
Yeah.
go up and are shining like stars in heaven. That's very much Greek mythology, or even Greek philosophy, like Heraclitus would say. Those hot souls become
they're
spirits,
yeah.
and they become because this heaven is more or less like a ceiling, and you've got these little pockets in the ceiling that these hot spirits, the hot gaseous spirits, come, and then they're burning there like stars.
Yeah.
And then these Gnostics said, well, that's just Greek philosophy. We know how to break through the ceiling and get to the true Father of all.
Yeah.
Because, anyway. Now, the fun thing, that we find this cult a bit weird. And we say, well, that can't be really it. And the beautiful thing is that this Gospel of Philip actually goes into that point here.
Okay. Let's do it.
Those who say there is an earthly man and one above him are wrong.
So that's the demiurge.
Yeah, that this is mind-boggling, because we've talked about heaven above earth for so long now. We think we go move up to God rather than stay down on earth. He says, those who say there is an earthly man and there is one above him are wrong. For the one who is visible to them, that's the outer body, is the one here. That's what we call the one below. So we say that is Lucas, and the Lucas, she, your soul, she inhabits this Lucas, he, the body. But there is also Lucas, the heavenly Lucas, the heavenly man Lucas, that if she would stay with her heavenly personality, then she would be free and would move up. Okay, that would be the spirit Lucas. And now he is saying that is wrong. For the one who is visible to them, body Lucas, is the one who is called the one below. And the one to whom the hidden one belongs is the one there who is above him. That's what people say. It would be better to say the inner, the outer, and the one outside the outside. So the inner would be the spirit, the outer would be the soul, and the body would be outside the outside. So basically what we feel, this is Gnostic text again, huh? Gnostic text is not so appreciative of the body. So the outside of the outside, that is like fringe. So our reality is fringe. And if you get to the core, you get to the soul, then within the core is the inner. And that's like the heavenly man. So he now makes a complete shift from a spatial idea to a psychological idea. And also the threats that are being showed in moving up spatially to God are called, a little later in the text, like jealousy and strife and envy. So that they're on your way in, that you have to get past those.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's really the psychological turn that we read here. I think it's fascinating in a text like this. And now he's engaging in some, now we get to the middle part. Or maybe I should first do the spear point again.
Spear point.
Therefore he says, before Christ, some came out where they could no longer go into. So the moment that we go out of paradise, we can no longer go into paradise. And they went to where they could no longer come out. They went into the world and they can't come out of the world anymore. That's the story of Genesis. They lost paradise. But Christ came. Those who had gone into the world, he brought out. And those who had gone out of paradise, he brought in. When Eve was in Adam, death did not exist. When she separated from him, death came into being. So here you see the male and the female. This is why the bridal chamber is so important. And here you see the paradise and the world. And that's why the integration is so important. Yet again, if he goes back into paradise, and if he receives himself there, Eve and Adam combined, spirit and soul combined, there will be no death. So life starts at the moment that spirit and soul are reunited by going into the inner man in paradise. That's the whole idea. So now we got all these stories of paradise, of heaven and earth, of the crucifixion. All these stories are now, all these images are mixed. And now it's getting fascinating because now he wants to connect that to Jesus. So now we get to the spearhead. Okay? Remember that we ended with, for it's better to say the inner, the outer, and the one outside the outside. Because of this, the Lord called the destruction the darkness on the outside. There's nothing else beyond it. There's this story that Jesus talks about someone who's being thrown out of the wedding feast. And he's thrown out in the outside, where it's the gnashing of teeth. That's where there's this weeping and gnashing of teeth. So people are bitter and resentful because they're in the outside. So living in the bodily world and being thrown into that world entirely gets you there. That's the darkness. That's the outside. He said, this is a very neat little illustration of how this goes. So we've got this darkness on the outside. There's nothing else beyond it. And then he goes into a text of Jesus. He said, my Father who is in the hidden one, he said, go into your chamber and close your door behind you and pray to your Father who is in the hidden one. So pray to your Father in the hidden one, and that's the hidden room in the gospel, rather than praying in the street. But he now says it's your inner self where you go into and where you pray to the Father, which is the one within all of them. So it's your deepest core, and that's where you find the Father. And now we move to the third part, and that which is within all of them is the pleroma, the other word for it, the fullness of God. After that, there's nothing else on the inside. You can't get inner than that. Of this, it is said that it's the one above them. So the highest God is within your heart. The big thing that's different from Orthodox Christianity is that you invite Christ to be in your heart and reign in your heart. Whereas this teacher would say that that divine spark is already in you. So that's the difference between Orthodox Christianity and Gnostic Christianity. But apart from that, I think this is an extremely interesting description of what you were talking about. You went into your experience where you found love, a logos that cannot be put into words. And then you take that out and you start living that on the outside.
Yeah.
So it's the integration of the inside and the outside, the above and the below, that changes you as a human being and then makes you able to live out that life on the outside. So what I ended with from the Gospel of Philip, the present world has become the pleroma. Heaven has become earth, the future has become the present, paradise has become, let's say, an industrial zone.
Yeah.
You can be both at the same time.
Yeah, and importantly, I think the experience is not enough. Some people, for example, they do psychedelics 5 times a year because they struggle so much with having experienced that and then bringing it inside.
Yeah.
Or if you use the metaphor differently, taking it outside. And I think...
So they leave it inside, is what you say. So they go into the inside, they experience it, and they leave it there, and then they go out again.
Yeah, if that's the metaphor we're using, you're leaving it inside. Or you take it outside for a little bit and then it falls back in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That happens all the time in those...
So you're not fully integrated.
No, and I think that's where the importance of a practice comes in.
Yeah.
When we were talking about discipline, you don't use it, you lose it type of deal. Like it's the same with exercise. You're just going to lose that muscle. And yeah, not having a spiritual tradition, not having something to like throw yourself at, which is, I think, also something people criticize Peterson of. They say, like, because he doesn't have that tradition, he fails to embody the wisdom that he often speaks about. In the sense that
he's more of the observer who looks from the outside on how it works. And
he's speaking about it all the time.
He's explaining it to us as the outside observer.
Yeah, he's converted more people than most priests, but he's failing to act it out for himself practically, and so having some sort of practice and ideally a tradition, I think, again I'm not sure, might be necessary.
I saw Tammy interviewing someone, his wife.
Yeah,
and she says, "Well, I'm moving toward Catholicism, but she started with praying the Rosary, which are all these little beads, and then you just do that in order to have a practice.
Yeah.
So it's entering their home very much. I don't think there is zero there.
No, but he's a middleman. That's what he is. Like he's in the middle.
Yeah.
He's an intermediary being. But no, you're right. But.
Well, the interesting thing about the Christian tradition here is this type of baptism is adult baptism. Right? It's about people who are consciously taking the decision and who have a very deep transforming experience. And not like baptism today. That is also transforming and it's also very deep, but it doesn't come close to the elaborateness of the 2nd century, 3rd century. Now, the fun thing is, you said you have to maintain it. And the way that they did it is every year you go through the cycle of the mythos. So every year you do Christmas, Easter, Ascension Day, Pentecost. Every day, every year you go through that cycle. And every week you go through the cycle of the Eucharist. So every week you go into the same moment of Christ dying and resurrection and you participating. So you reenact your ayahuasca experience in a way.
Yeah.
Ritually.
Death and resurrection.
Every year, every week. And then you also do it every day because you actually go into the night and you say, Lord, I'm going into the night. Please let me sleep.
Yeah.
Keep me safe. Then you come out of it on the other side and you say, Lord, it's a new day. What can I do for you? Use me as you wish. So your whole prayer life your daily prayer life, your weekly church life, your annual story life, narrative life, tradition, that all reenacts, if it's done properly, a transformative experience that you are part of. I think as a church, we've lost a lot of that.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is how powerful it could be.
No, exactly. So when we're talking about this, it's not like, hey, go to church, everything's fixed. I think we both can easily acknowledge how much we lack nowadays, and sometimes it's hard to see what the way forward is. But just seeing what the value is, or was at least, or still is in some places.
Yeah.
That's it. But then to give Vervaeke his due, there seem to be ways of integrating this without the narrative.
Have you found it?
Well, he gives often the example of Buddhism, which is...
It's a narrative.
Yes, but a lot of people that practice this don't seem to, at least, and I'm very ignorant about Buddhism, not have it to the same degree that we have it in the Christian tradition. We live inside this story and we reread the Gospels.
Yes, you're right. The narrative of the Exodus, the narrative of the Babylonian... I've lost the English word for it. Sorry about that. But the fact that they were brought into Babylon and out of the Promised Land and had to come back, and the Babylonian exile. Thank you. The narrative of Jesus. That those are such powerful narratives that they really govern more the ritual than anything else, and the practices. I think that you're right that if you look at Buddhist tradition, that especially the way that we encounter it from the West, we encounter the practices.
Yeah, it's
more than the stories.
Yeah. Although
I would not dare to say that Buddhists themselves would be narrative free.
No,
I don't think so at all.
No, certainly not. And I must say, like, for myself, reading about Buddha, I don't think even directly. I did read some of the texts, but he does embody some of those same archetypal features. Yeah. It's not the same as Christ, definitely not. It's a different type of archetype, but it's definitely something you can aspire to, and seems to have a similar effect. But I'd say again, like you just highlighted just now, some people try to move post that narrative, and so that's the big contest.
It's a good test. Will Western type Buddhism, without the narrative foundations of Buddhism, without the worldview of Buddhism, trying to just do the practices in a post-religious world, will it be as beneficial and as powerful?
Yeah, or maybe the Vervaeke route, what he's trying to do. He's trying to do without narrative as well. Will that be successful?
Well, he's not doing it entirely without narrative. What he is doing with embodying the sage, you can choose different sages,
like this,
like Aristotle, like Socrates, but
right.
Also Jesus, etc. So I don't think he's entirely without narrative. He just doesn't commit to a single narrative.
No, you're right, and there's also a funny distinction between, like, we don't have to regurgitate the discussions between Vervaeke and Jordan Peterson, where they endlessly debate what story means or what narrative means.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're like, So we don't have to do that. But I think that at least I'm open to whatever is possible for people. I know that my path, it works. I see the framework. I feel it. I feel the presence. It's my grammar. I have biblical grammar inside of me. That's just who I am. But I know there's people from other cultures where that would be very difficult, and that there's people that are so traumatized by whatever Christianity they encountered that they can't do it. So all I'm saying is
it can be a poison narrative.
Yeah, and there's bad religion in there for sure. And all I'm saying is that I'm very open to what that has to offer, even though it probably is not my path, because I don't think that's possible for me, and I have too deep of a connection
Yes, but you can be empathetic when
sure.
you talk to other people.
For sure. And I don't think I'm better.
I love having discussions with people from different traditions, not because we're discussing who's right, who's wrong, but I like to know what they experience, and I often feel there's more that we share, and I feel, and that's I think where Peterson comes from. Behind all these stories are archetypal stories, that go back thousands of years, if not longer.
Yeah.
And these are stories of how to be in the world. And some people have remarked that the story of Jesus is pretty much almost like the Lord of the Rings. It was one of these stories that combines so many of these archetypical stories that it is super powerful. Now, I happen to believe that Jesus rose from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, call me weird or unscientific, but I'm not doing it on scientific grounds, but on historical grounds. But even so, I really don't care that much about it.
No.
It's happenstance. If God would have chosen to reveal himself, or if in this language, truth would have chosen to reveal herself through any other story, any other human being, any other life, any other concept, that would have been as good.
Yeah, I think the underlying thing is, sorry.
But I'm convinced that what the friends of Jesus, his mother, his girlfriends, his boyfriends, and let's just use those words, not in a sexual way, but really to understand that these were people who shared their life together. What they experienced was nothing less than the coming of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. And
that Paul said, and we all started to say, Abba, Father. We all received that spirit of engaging this larger divinity, this thing that is larger than even the universe, as hey, Daddy. And that's weird. It's not because we believe that there is a man with a beard.
No, but
it's a way of feeling at home in this world.
Yes. And I want to say that when I grew up, what I rejected was a resurrected biological male that went literally up into a cloud, and I think what a lot of people do nowadays is that's how they reject God as well. Like they reject the biological male in the sky, or they reject the biological person whose organs are literally gutted out and then it's somehow magically restored. If you think you understand the resurrection, you've already lost. I think that's one of the most important things when we approach this topic. It's like you cannot understand it, and the text is not written for you to understand it. But I think where my conviction comes from much more deeply is that I believe that self-sacrifice is going to lead to salvation and redemption. That's the underlying thing. That's what the story is supposed. Like that's what you're supposed to feel when you believe this story. It's like, okay, I actually believe, and it's what we see in all of our movies that are good. At least it's like the person who gives himself the most, he's gonna be resurrected. He's gonna be glorified, or she. And I was watching just this documentary about freediving. Incredible story about this guy Stephen Keenan. He's so freediving is basically when you go down
without scuba gear.
Yeah, and then you go back up, and some people go down for minutes and minutes and minutes. And this guy was a safety, so security, and he helps the person up. And his girlfriend, actually, who's like a world record breaker, he tries to help her do this impossible dive in Egypt underneath this crazy stone structure, and it's like something only one woman has ever done before, and she's trying to do it, and he's her safety, and something goes wrong, and he's looking for her, and she's been underwater for so long, and he actually gives himself up, he gives his own life up to get her just to the surface level, and he dies there, and he's venerated like no one else, and it almost becomes mythical what happened there. It's the fact that we have the images that we even almost believe the story. But
there's only one way in which this makes sense. There's no way that it's self-sacrifice that it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's the only way, and then I get to my hobby horse again.
Yeah.
Tack, 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 tack.
Yeah.
The only way in which this makes sense is that he loves her so much that he is happy enough to give his life so that she can live. Because she is part of him. Mm. His experience of what is useful, is that, like this man that brought his 3 children to the shore and died in the process. I think he died a happy man. Not that that's too harsh. Sorry about that. But I think that he would say that he made the right choice.
Yeah.
He wants them to live desperately.
Yeah.
Because he loves them, and love is a way of that makes things possible, and that's why I don't think that people who say, well, it's all about suffering and the cross, etc. No. The cross is the proof of Jesus' love for his friends.
Yeah.
It's to show how deep the love goes of God for every human being. That's what it shows, because I would say it's the way that the inside came outside and brought us in. It's the way that the above came down and brought us up. It's that experience that we can become integrated, that this world can be both a nasty, rotten, corruptible world and heaven on earth in the presence of God.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful place to end it as well.
Oh, okay. Good. That's
You're happy with that?
Yeah.
Did you get to everything you wanted?
This is my hobby horse, so I'm happy to end on my hobby horse.
Yeah. No, I think it's a beautiful way to end. Okay. We'll see if we can continue. I'm sure we'll see this man back on the channel. It was a pleasure to do it in person.
Yeah, these were the Gospel of Philip things that we did. 3 of the 12. We won't do many more.
We won't bore you.
Won't bore you to death. But I'm happy that I could share a tradition that's not my own. It's a Gnostic tradition, but I think that the wisdom in that tradition has helped me so much to understand my own tradition better.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you for that.
That's beautiful. Thank you, sir.